present to you Lynne Hart.
Good evening. I am very pleased to be here to have the opportunity to tell my family's story. Actually, it's really my husband Ted's story, but one that affected me and my children and my friends and extended family. This is the first time I've told my story in a public setting, so be patient with me, please. My husband Ted and I met in high school. We were married a year after graduation in 1973. A few years later, I became pregnant with our first child, Lisa, who is here with me tonight. She was due to be born in June of 1976. Ted and I were both working, and I had put in my resignation so that I could be a stay-at-home mom. It was March, and I still had 2 more months to work. Ted was a certified body man and refinisher on automobiles, cars, and trucks. And he was at a large auto dealership and had a promising career ahead of him. One day he noticed that he was losing feeling in his right fingers, and his left eye was blurry. When he started dropping his power tools, his boss insisted that he see a doctor. Ted was diagnosed with MS in the spring of 1976, when I was 6 months pregnant with Lisa. I remember laying in bed one night crying because I couldn't figure out how I was going to push a stroller and a wheelchair at the same time. Ted and I knew well the effects of this disease because Ted's mother was diagnosed before we met, and she was already unable to work or walk and care for herself. Ted was unable to go back to his job because of the effects of his MS, so he sold all of his tools and our second car just to pay the rent and put food on the table that summer. In September 1976, Ted's situation improved, so he repurchased his tools with borrowed money and went back to work. He did not want to give up, and to this day, his mantra has been, "I never give up." Ted was only able to work as a body man and refinisher for a short time before the MS took its toll again. He then took a position as manager in a local repair and paint franchise. He was eventually let go from that job because the owner felt the customers were put off by his occasional need for a wheelchair. Thank goodness that cannot happen today. He then took a less strenuous job at a local hospital, sterilizing lab equipment and test tubes. Eventually, while he was working there, Ted and I added our son Kevin to the family in 1980. Shortly after that, Ted was asked to resign that position because he was dropping beakers and test tubes and it was becoming very costly to the hospital. That's when he finally applied for disability, which took between a year and 18 months to be approved. For a long while, Ted was very angry. His self-esteem was eroded by his inability to support his family, the impotence often caused by MS. We were in our 20s, and he experienced serious depression. He was so afraid that I was going to leave him because he was no longer the man he used to be. It didn't help that a neighbor was spreading the word that Ted was a damn drunk because he was seen staggering when he attempted to walk without his cane. Ted would have days when he just wouldn't get out of bed. There were very few medications used for MS at that time, and the medication he was taking at one point made him nearly suicidal. Rather than try to work through this with Ted, his neurologist told us he would not see Ted any longer until he got mental help. There was so much misunderstanding about this disease, including the side effects of the medication available at that time. It was a very frightening time in the lives of my family. Our family moved from Cleveland, Ohio to Athens, Alabama in 1999. The cold and snowy winters took their toll on Ted, and it was getting difficult for him to get around. I began working for a small nonprofit organization and could not get family medical coverage because of Ted's illness. Ted was taken off his medication for MS completely, mainly because Medicare does not cover the cost of such medications, and they are very expensive. What we didn't know was that while off the medications, the MS was still causing damage to his brain, where most of his lesions were located, even though he appeared to be in remission. Slowly, the MS was stealing his memories and cognitive abilities due to the brain atrophy that MS was causing. His short-term memory was worse each year, and Ted's brain atrophy could never be reversed. His ability to walk was more impaired each year. In 2005, Ted fell and broke his hip and was confined to a wheelchair permanently. The MS also caused him tremors, which sometimes made it difficult for him to feed himself. He has also been incontinent for many years. With Ted's disability increasing, I became Ted's nurse. I worked all day and cared for Ted all night. That included changing his Depends, bathing him, dressing him, shaving him, and helping him eat when needed, and picking him up off the floor when he fell. It was exhausting, and it began to take a toll on my physical and mental health. Our close friends knew what we were going through. However, acquaintances, such as people that we knew at church, on Sunday morning saw a clean and neat Ted, happy to be there. Not many really thought about what it took to get Ted here, get Ted there. If Ted wasn't with me, they would ask, "How's Ted?" And I was pleased that people cared. But when a friend put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Lynn, how are you holding up?" I cried. Very few people consider the caregiver. If you know anyone caring for a loved one with a long-term illness, I encourage you to take a minute and ask how they are doing. I assure you it will be a blessing to them. As the brain atrophy worsened, Ted could no longer remember his past. Things like our wedding day, honeymoon, the births of our children, and eventually the births of our grandchildren were things that he could no longer recall. Yesterday, he couldn't even remember what he ate at his last meal. It is a lonely thing for a caregiver to watch the person she or he loves disappear before their eyes. Ted had been in a nursing home for about 1.5 years. It was a very hard decision to make, but necessary for Ted's safety and for my well-being. In 3 days, this Sunday, I'll be celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary. It's been a hard road, one I would not wish on anyone. Some people say that I'm a hero for staying with Ted, but Ted is my hero. He's never given up. He was the joy of the nursing home. He smiled all the time, greeted other residents, and the staff told me when they were having a bad day, they would go and visit Ted, because he would always make them smile. And he never complained. For that, we are very blessed. It could have been different. Last December, when Ted was in an activity at the nursing home, the residents were asked to write down a list of what they wanted most for Christmas. My husband wrote down one thing on his paper: my wife. That I will hold with me forever. Ted can never be cured of this disease, but his wish has always been that a cure be found so that he would never have to worry about his children and grandchildren suffering his fate. Years ago, he expressed the desire to donate his body to MS research because he wanted to do something positive with this horrible disease for which he did not ask. In June, my son Kevin participated in Bike MS in Athens. He rode for his father, and immediately after the event, he went to the nursing home and he put his award around my husband's neck. I applaud those of you who are here today and being honored, because you are working to make my husband's dream a reality. There is little hope that Ted will find his miracle, but every year something new is developing in MS. My best friend, Bonnie Foster, who is here tonight, raise your hand, is proof that what you are doing is making a difference. Bonnie and her husband Hart were part of a motorcycle club and were on a weekend ride. Bonnie began to experience numbness that slowly traveled from her toes up to her lips. She was diagnosed with MS in 1988. Eventually, her symptoms subsided, went into remission, and she began to think that she had been misdiagnosed. Bonnie and I met in Athens in the year 2000 through a mutual acquaintance, and soon after, Bonnie joined our organization and we became co-workers. We believe that God brought us together, Bonnie being from Michigan and I from Ohio, because I began to recognize insidious signs that Bonnie was experiencing progression. I strongly suggested that she see a neurologist, which she did. Bonnie has been on an MS therapy drug for several years now and has experienced very little progression in her disease. Ted was too far for that. Those medications wouldn't have helped him anymore. Every year, hope increases because of research made possible by your fundraising efforts. That couldn't happen without you. I thank you personally, and on behalf of my husband Ted, my children, my friend Bonnie, and her husband Hart. I know that if Ted was here, he would give you one of his big grins and say, "Thank you. Please never give up the fight." Now, before I step down from the stage, I just want to share with you that I wrote this about a week ago, and at that time it was all true. But I wrote that Ted could never find his miracle. I'm sorry. He found his miracle yesterday at 6 p.m. when God took him home. He's cured. He's no longer in that wheelchair in that bed. So he got his miracle. But please continue the fight, because there are other people who need you. And I thank you for allowing me to come and tell Ted's story tonight. Thank you.